Hi, I'm Dr. David Purves. I've come off the river because I don't have a whiteboard on the river and I just want to illustrate some points with diagrams. In this film, I'm going to make the case that all behaviour is goal-driven and motivated. And that includes depression, anxiety, stress, panic, generalised anxiety disorder, a whole load of other things. Now you might say, whoa, hang on, I'm not motivated to be depressed, anxious or stressed. Well, of course, no, you're not. But that doesn't mean that your motivational system isn't driving you there or keeping you stuck there. Let me explain. All behaviour is goal-driven and motivated. There's nothing that you do that does not satisfy a goal and that you're motivated to achieve it. If I'm a little bit hungry, I'm not highly motivated to find food. If I'm very hungry, I'm highly motivated to find food. So there we have the goal of finding food and the motivation, the drive to achieve it. An old teacher once said to me that a horse, if it has food and water, pretty much doesn't care where it goes. It just kind of wanders around by and large, because its goals of food and water are more or less satisfied. But if you put a horse on a rider, all of a sudden the horse becomes an instrument of the rider's will. The horse goes where the rider wants it to go. The horse fulfills the rider's intentions through goal-driven behaviour. So here we have the rider represents goals and the horse represents motivation, motive power, mobility, and of course emotion. So the horse and the rider work together to achieve the goal. Now, let's take the example of anxiety. If you're anxious, what is the goal that you're trying to achieve? Okay, that's the question. Let's backtrack a little bit. What is anxiety? Anxiety is basically a feeling of threat. Now, if you're anxious, you're going to feel threatened. By definition, anxiety and threat go together. Anxiety is the manifestation of that feeling of threat in your body. You know, the rapid breathing, the increased pulse rate, the narrowed focus of attention, looking for threat, being wary of threat, being prepared for threat. So anxiety is a feeling of threat. It's also an overestimation of threat. If you are in a room with an axe murderer, you should feel frightened. If you're sitting at home watching the TV and, you know, in a sense, objectively perfectly safe, you shouldn't feel frightened. And if you feel anxious there, you know that your brain is overestimating any potential threat. Okay, so anxiety is an overestimation of threat. If you're anxious, what are you motivated to do? What is your goal to achieve? So if you're anxious, what is your goal? Well, I'm going to suggest if you're anxious, your goal is safety. If you're anxious, your goal is to achieve safety. And you're highly motivated to achieve that safety. Now, if you're anxious, how do you achieve safety? Well, the way to achieve safety is to manage as many of the experiences, control as many of the experiences as you possibly can, and those things that you can't control, adequately diminish them, make them smaller, reduce them. So what happens if you're anxious often is that your life, you know, was a circle of friends, acquaintances, activities, etc., etc. And what happens is if you feel threatened and you're trying to be safe, you reduce the size of your life until it feels adequately manageable and you feel safe. So your goal, therefore, is to be safe because you feel threatened. And it's a perfectly legitimate goal. Your goal is to stay safe. But recall, anxiety is an overestimation of threat. Anxiety is an overestimation of threat. You're already safe. You just don't feel it. So to achieve this sense of safety, you have to be extra safe. You have to be safer than everybody else because you're already safe. So you have to constrict your life down to a point where you have yourself a discomfort zone. Not a comfort zone, a discomfort zone. You restrict your life until it's adequately manageable, feels adequately safe, but is smaller and less involved than it used to be. perhaps go out less, perhaps mix with people less, perhaps do less things that you used to enjoy doing, perhaps drive less, don't go on motorways less, don't go to restaurants less, don't mix in crowds less, engage in things less, push yourself less, challenge your boundaries less. It's a bit of a misnomer, really, a bit of a misapplication of a title. This little discomfort zone where you feel safe actually is not that pleasant a place to be. But that's where a lot of people end up, because their goal is to be safe from the threat that they feel. And that means that the only way they can do that is to restrict their life down to a point where they feel adequately safe. So your goal is to be safe, and your horse, your motivation, is taking you there, because of course nobody wants to feel threatened, and so it really, is a motivating thing to want to feel safe. So your goal is to achieve safety, and your motivational system will take you there. The problem is that anxiety is an overestimation of threat. I mean, if you feel anxious, if you have the experience of anxiety, you will have been somewhere where you would objectively say, there is no threat here. I'm in bed, I'm having a panic attack, I'm at home, or I'm with friends, or I'm at work, and I'm feeling unsafe. And yet nothing happens. The threat, whatever it is, doesn't occur. So anxiety, being the overestimation of threat, has driven you to want to stay extra safe, which has meant that you've constricted your life potentially to the point where, it's a lot less life than it used to be. It all comes about because your brain has overestimated the level of threat that you're under, forcing these new goals upon your system. So now, this is a great example of going with the flow. And when you go with the flow, of course, you don't feel that you have any control over where you're going, because in fact you don't. You're being driven by this goal of being safe, not always knowing why, but there you are. The goal of being safe has a further consequence which we can kind of expand upon, and that's that you're probably going to want to avoid a whole lot of stuff. We've talked about avoiding motorways and parties and other kinds of things, but you're also going to want to avoid challenging the discomfort zone, because the discomfort zone is the only place that you feel really safe. So go on a holiday on an airplane, or go somewhere out of your discomfort zone, you're going to not want to do it, and you're probably going to actively resist doing it. So your discomfort zone and your goal of staying safe actually prevents you from challenging the original belief that you're under threat. That's going to keep you trapped. That's going to keep you feeling relatively low in control, and nothing's going to change just by itself. This locked in discomfort zone, this going with the flow experience, is not going to change just by itself, because there's no force being put in to make it change. So you see, your brain, being goal-driven and highly motivated, is driving you towards this place that's just about manageable, but it is not the kind of life that you could have. What needs to happen is that we need to challenge the basic assumption that you're under threat, which undercuts this need for safety and allows that small discomfort zone to expand. So I hope that's of interest to you. In the next film, I'm going to tell you how to challenge this basic sense of threat, and thereby to start to allow your discomfort zone to expand naturally without you having to push it, and thereby without you feeling that you're particularly stepping too far from the discomfort zone. I hope you found this information interesting and potentially thought-provoking. There's a place to leave comments below. Please leave some comments and we'll respond to them if we're able. And comments that are relevant to what we said here, potentially we can incorporate some of those bits into the next film. So please make sure that you check your email. The next film will be coming to you in about 3 or 4 days' time, and I look forward to talking with you then. Thanks for taking the time to watch and listen.